Hey guys, Culture here. Today we're going to discuss what money is worth. More specifically, we'll delve into the creation of money as we now know it and the different forms money takes.
I know one form. Bling! I got bling coming out the wazoo, Culture. Ice on my trains. You stepping to me, bro? Huh?
This is definitely your worst persona ever. Jewelry is valuable, sure, but that's more like wealth. I'm talking about actual money. Money is defined as anything commonly accepted by people for the exchange of goods and services.
No, like cold hard cash? I got plenty of that too. Mainly from pawning off all my bling to afford rent this month.
So you don't have plenty of money.
I do, until I don't. But when I don't, I have lots of bling, so it all works out, you know?
Crash, your ability to hold a conversation has somehow diminished over the course of doing this show.
What's so hard to understand? My wealth is in a state of flux between money and liquid assets.
I hate that you actually made sense just then. Our current system of money that allows us to do things like superfluously exchange our hard-earned dough for frivolous jewelry didn't always exist. Back in the Upper Paleolithic era, about 40,000 years ago, hunters were known to trade their flint tools with each other depending on necessity. Of course, people were inclined to get the best trade they could, creating the earliest known form of bartering. Bartering is the exchange of goods and services for one another. For example, trading bags of rice for seeds.
Why would I trade anything for rice or seeds? How does that get me any closer to owning a Porsche?
This might astound you to learn, but they didn't have Porsches 40,000 years ago.
Whatever the prehistoric equivalent of a Porsche is then. What of those Flintstone cars? They were cool.
In your own idiotic way, you make a good point. The problem with bartering is that people might not want what you have to offer. To get something more valuable, you would need to make a series of exchanges, which would waste a lot of time, and even then makes no guarantee that the next person you trade with will want what you have. This led to the implementation of commodities. Commodities are items used by practically everyone, like salt, tea, and cattle. Therefore, if you traded your goods for a commodity, you could almost definitely guarantee that you could trade on that commodity for the goods or services you actually want.
So it's like if I created my own economy where everyone paid for things in Doritos, because everyone wants Doritos, it's a well-known fact, but the issue is I want Doritos too, so why would I ever trade away my precious cheesy Doritos? Unless someone had Mountain Dew. The choice is too difficult!
Commodities do have a couple of issues. Let's use your disgusting dietary choices as an example. Doritos could degrade over time, and under certain environmental conditions, be ruined. You wouldn't want the Doritos you traded for to suddenly be destroyed by rainy weather. Mountain Dew is safe inside its bottle, but it'd be cumbersome to carry around liters upon liters of the stuff just so that you could trade it. In short, commodities can degrade over time and lose their value, or be difficult to transport. A number of tokens arose as a solution to these problems. Amber, obsidian, beads. In fact, in South America, Aztecs collected taxes in the form of cocoa beans. Even shells were used, mother of pearl in the Americas, and cowrie shells in Asia and Europe.
Wait, shells were used as money? So back in the day, beachcombers were probably the richest people.
Yeah, unlike nowadays where they're just worthless wastes of space. Hey Crash, have you ever considered becoming a beachcomber?
Bitch.
The point of shells and other tokens was to have an object that was relatively small, light, and non-degradable that was rare enough to be controlled in circulation. Of course, the best examples of such an object are precious metals, gold, silver, and bronze. Their attractiveness and rarity makes their value easily seen to a prospective trader. Our earliest known usage of precious metals as money was in 5000 BC in Mesopotamia, where precious metals were measured in a unit of weight known as a shekel. This meant whenever a sale was to occur, the merchant would weigh the customer's metals to determine the shekels and proceed with the purchase from there. As you can imagine, this weighing process was time-consuming and in need of replacement.
Like brushing my teeth or washing my hair or putting on deodorant, all just time-wasting activities. And soon my morning shower will meet the same fate, retiring to the hall of forgotten hygiene routines.
I've never heard someone boast so proudly of their own putridity. Rulers soon saw fit to remove the need for weighing metals by creating units of metal with set weights. Coins. These coins were stamped with an official seal to certify that they had been weighed, proving their worth upon sight to any merchant. Coins were first used by the Lydians in 700 BC to pay for mercenary soldiers, among other things. With the advent of coinage, the comparison of monetary value of goods became far easier to determine, allowing specific prices of goods to be established by consensus. The coin supply and circulation could also be tightly controlled by governments, since they required mining, smelting, and minting to produce.
That's all the government has ever wanted. To control us by making us rely on money. To tax us for the money we earned with our blood, sweat, and tears. When will the extortion end?
Why are you, of all people, complaining? You haven't paid a single cent of tax in your life. It may be true that money divided us by creating a hierarchy, the rich and the poor, a system perpetuated by taxes and the elite's control of wealth distribution. But far more importantly, money has united us with a common language, so to speak. Everyone can have faith in the system of money, and that allows us to trust one another and develop far-reaching relationships. Without money, the Silk Road connecting East and West could never have formed, and the diverse cultures of each location would not have been shared.
Oh, I get it. So, kind of like how I can buy my antifungal medication from that Taiwanese guy downtown despite us not speaking the same language.
Gross example, but yeah, that's right. And since we're on the topic, coins developed slightly differently in the East. In 500 BC China, the first metal coins were actually tiny bronze replicas of the tools that they were trading as a symbol of the goods, like knives and spades. These tokens later took on a circular shape, with a square hole in the middle that allowed the coins to be threaded on a piece of string and easily carried around. Of course, nowadays we'd scoff at carrying around pockets of change in exchange for folding money.
Or you can just hang your money around your neck, like my diamond-studded dollar sign necklace. Oh yeah, baby. The sheer weight of this bad boy is giving me back problems.
Paper money first developed in China from promissory notes. In case you don't know, promissory notes are essentially pieces of paper that entitle the holder to a certain amount of money or other resources stored away in banks or warehouses. Since the promissory note could change hands, it effectively represented the stored away wealth. The promissory note became a handy way for merchants to perform transactions worth huge amounts of money, as there was no need to hand over bags upon bags of copper coins. But it wasn't until 960 AD, during the Song dynasty in China, that the government, now running out of copper to make their coins with, decided to start circulating paper notes that represented these strings of copper coins. And don't you even think about counterfeiting your own notes. The penalty for such a crime was written on the notes themselves. Counterfeiters will be decapitated.
Sure beats the hell out of In God We Trust.
In Europe, paper money was representative of a certain weight of precious metals. This value was guaranteed by governments and banks, who promised to trade this representative money for silver and gold. The British pound sterling is so called because it was originally guaranteed to be exchanged for £1 of sterling silver. Through a series of quite logical steps, people the world over now believed that rectangular pieces of paper had value. This allowed for international trade and the formation of the first currency market to exchange between denominations.
Kind of like how in jail everyone buys illegal items and shady services with cigarettes.
You say that like you've experienced it yourself.
There's a lot about me you don't know, culture.
The crazy thing is our paper money and coins are no longer backed by gold and silver. Instead, we have fiat money, meaning let it be done. Essentially, our money is decreed by law to have a certain value, and it's illegal for a person to refuse legal tender in place of some other form of payment.
So our money is worth nothing?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but clearly we can see that our idea of money has changed drastically over human history, and what's considered valuable entirely depends on the economy of the time and place. Take, for example, a phenomenon called tulip mania that occurred in the Netherlands between 1636 and 1637.
Tulip mania? Sounds like a flower-based demolition derby.
In 1593, tulips were brought to the Netherlands from Turkey and were cultivated for their beauty and rarity, making tulips a status symbol for the Dutch middle class. Adding to this rarity was a virus known as tulip breaking virus that creates a mosaic pattern on the petals, making the tulips even more beautiful and rare. People would pay a good sum for this rare tulip, but they couldn't actually buy the bulb of the flower because they'd need to wait for a certain time of year when the tulip bulb could be safely moved. Instead, they'd buy a promise of the tulip. In trading, this is called a future, in this case a tulip future. Suddenly, it wasn't just flower aficionados and status seekers that were buying tulips. Market speculators saw that these tulip futures could be bought and then sold on for a higher price to make a profit. This led to the formation of what we call a bubble.
Don't talk so condescendingly, culture. I know what a bubble is. Like a snot bubble, or blowing bubbles in your milk, or when you fart in the bath.
No, Crash. A bubble in economics is when an item is traded for a price far above its intrinsic value. Essentially, the bubble bursts when the buyer of said item can no longer find anyone willing to pay more for it. This chain reaction was set off in February of 1637 at a tulip auction in the city of Haarlem, when buyers refused to show up. Confidence in tulip futures plummeted, and speculators tried to sell off the futures at a lower price to cut their losses. The tulip's price fell dramatically, and many of the Dutch were left out of pocket during a time in which the bubonic plague was again breaking out in Europe.
That's sad and all, but what's your point here? Please tell me there's a point and that I didn't just listen to you ramble on about tulips for no reason.
To these people, tulip futures were money, the promise of a pretty flower, and their value was predicated upon what they thought they could sell it for. We can see how collective imagination creates money, and what happens when that collective imagination is stretched to a breaking point.
Yeah, well, maybe in some old economy people were that dumb, but not now.
Is that true though? Fine art, stocks, cryptocurrencies, these are all areas where the value of an item is determined largely by speculation. The way we assign value to things is made up. It's a matter of consensus. If a seller can convince a buyer that what they have to offer is worth a certain amount, then it is.
So money is worth whatever we say it is?
Pretty much.
In that case, I'm gonna go buy a Porsche for $1. I'll be back in a jiffy.
Oh, I gotta see how this turns out. See you all soon. If you enjoy what we do here at Culture Crash, please consider supporting the show via our Patreon, where we have a bunch of awesome rewards, or by checking out our online store. All links are in the description below.